Welcome to The Explainer. I am so incredibly glad you're joining us today because we are embarking on what is basically a giant etymological detective story. We're going to focus really specifically on the nuances of language, its cascading effect over time, and how a core message centered on the absolute oneness of God has actually never changed, even when the words used to describe it did. We're drawing on a deeply reflective source text today to track how translations fundamentally shaped human history and theology. So let's just dive right into it. It sounds almost impossible, doesn't it? Like, how could a single translator word literally change the course of human history? Well, the source author presents a really compelling argument here. They suggest that deep linguistic drift, basically the slow, steady morphing of ancient Semitic concepts into Greco-Roman frameworks, actually created these massive theological divides, divisions that have stuck around for millennia. So today, we're going to explore how humanity's deepest theological differences might actually just be rooted in the mechanics of translation.
Which brings us to Section 1, the unchanging core message.
Now, before we can even look at how language drifted, we have to establish our baseline, right? What is the constant here? Well, across thousands of years of ancient texts, the source identifies this completely unshakable core, the absolute, unqualified oneness of God. We see this foundational declaration right away in the Shema from Deuteronomy. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. It's just absolute clarity. According to the text, this isn't some compound unity. It's a strict declaration of numerical oneness, pushing back against the polytheism of the ancient world. This is our anchor. And centuries later, that exact same concept is mirrored perfectly. In the Quran, it says, say God is one. It's the exact same foundational message, totally untethered from any specific geography or time period. These texts agree completely on this irreducible core.
Moving on to Section 2, the illusion of translation.
So if that core message was so crystal clear, what caused all the drift? Well, when humanity forced these ancient Semitic concepts into Greco-Roman frameworks, meanings began to shift. This is really the inciting incident of our detective story. Take the word gospel, for example. Its original roots, the Greek euangelion and the Arabic Injil, both literally just mean good news. The author points out that originally, the gospel was a living, spoken revelation of truth given to a prophet. It wasn't a bound, multi-chapter document compiled by councils of men generations later. But over time, translation totally shifted our understanding, from a spontaneous spoken message to a physical artifact. The source highlights another massive divergence that is rooted purely in language. Take the word Allah. Now, so many people today view this as a completely separate entity. But if you actually break down the linguistics, it reveals something else entirely. Al means the, and Ilah means worshipped being. And it originates from the exact same linguistic root as the Hebrew El or Elohim that you find all throughout the Torah. It's simply the Arabic term for the worshipped one. Arab Christians were using it for centuries before Islam even existed. It is the same God, just a different language. Let's look at Section 3, redefining Father and Son. We are now diving into what is arguably the single most consequential case study of linguistic drift, the translation of the words father and son. In the ancient Semitic world, the root word for father, Av or Baba, carried the meaning of a gateway, a threshold, or the ultimate source of existence. The source argues that describing God as the Father originally meant God as the origin point through which all souls enter existence. But here's the catch. When that Semitic idiom was translated into the Greco-Roman world, they used the word pater, and pater carried a literal, biological, patriarchal connotation. So a word pointing to the mystical source of all existence morphed into a biological parent. The metaphor was completely literalized. And you can see how this cascaded right into the concept of the Son of God. If you read the Old Testament, the phrase is everywhere. It's applied to angels, to Adam, to the entire nation of Israel, King David, and even to literally all human beings in Psalm 82. In the ancient world, Son of God was just a very common idiom. It expressed a closeness, a covenant, a deep alignment with God's will. The text demonstrates really clearly that it was never a statement of biological offspring or a shared divine essence. It was an idiom of alignment. Which actually brings us to a surprisingly simple, yet absolutely massive realization. Think about it. A lot of modern theological arguments rely heavily on the capitalization of the S in Son of God, suggesting it's this unique, exclusive title rather than a general description. But here's the thing.
Ancient Aramaic, Hebrew, and Greek scripts had absolutely no uppercase or lowercase letters. None. Zero. This source notes that capitalizing the S is entirely a modern translator's invention, inserted centuries later. So we are often deriving these huge, deep theological divides from medieval editorial choices. Kinda wild, right? Now for section 4. The Word and the One. As concepts of God's action moved across linguistic borders, they were fundamentally altered. Let's compare the Aramaic memra with the Greek logos. In ancient Jewish synagogues, they used the word memra to describe God's active speech or creative command. When God spoke, creation just happened. But as this text moved into Greek, it became the logos. And Greek philosophy treated the logos not just as an action, but eventually as a separate, distinct divine entity. The active command of God suddenly became a person next to God. Now, this cascading effect didn't happen overnight. It was a long process. You have Jesus speaking Aramaic in the 30s. Decades later, the Gospels are written in Greek, applying Greek linguistic frameworks. Then it takes hundreds of years, culminating in the Council of Nicaea and the Council of Chalcedon, for human councils to debate, vote on, and officially codify these Greek linguistic translations into highly complex doctrines like the hypostatic union. It's described by our sources essentially a centuries-long game of linguistic telephone. Which brings us to the famous phrase, I am, in Greek, ego eimi, which echoes the Hebrew eyeh asher ya'eh, and is actually beautifully mirrored in the Sufi Arabic chant, Allahu, the worshipped one is. The source author argues that when ancient prophets used these phrases, they definitely weren't claiming literal divinity. They were making a statement of pure egoless existence, a profound continuity with the divine. It's a statement that their soul recognizes itself as part of God's eternal reality, not that they are literally the creator of the universe. Because if we return to our scriptural anchor, the text is completely explicit. Numbers 23:19 tells us directly, God is not a man, nor a son of man. The core rule established from the very beginning is that God transcends all human form, all gender, and all limitation. Period. And finally, section 5, beyond linguistic drift. So if we strip away the centuries of translation errors, the Greco-Roman philosophical frameworks, and the human council votes, what's actually left? Well, what remains is remarkably simple. 1, recognize one unique ultimate being. 2, be a good person. Feed the hungry, act justly, love your neighbor. And 3, know that you will be held accountable for your actions. According to our source today, this is the unchanging message that every single prophet carried. It's the baseline truth, completely free from the errors of translation. Which leaves us with a final, really provocative thought. Are our deepest theological divisions truly divine, or are they simply lost in translation? When we actually understand how words morph across time and culture, we have to stop and ask ourselves, how much of what divides us is actually rooted in heaven, and how much is just the messy result of human history? It's a pretty powerful question to reflect on, isn't it? Thank you so much for joining me to explore this fascinating etymological journey today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.